Hi, my name is Juliana Saxton. I'm Professor Emeritus at the University of Victoria Department of Theatre, and I'm talking today about a play for its makers, mainstream, applied, postmodern, post-dramatic theatre, and the risks of engagement. In these days of COVID-19, we remember with deep sadness the pleasures of going to the theatre, of reading or hearing about a new production, finding a companion or two to join us and purchasing the tickets, and it better be worth it. Maybe having a drink or a bite to eat before or after, getting to the theatre, being absorbed into the expectant crowd, finding our seats and the deep and happy pleasure of the lights dimming and the knowledge that something living in three-dimensional space is about to be revealed. London, Paris, Bangkok, Hong Kong, New York, Stratford, Shaw, our own local or university theatres, there's always a shiver, an expectation, as Peter Brook terms it, of the mystery that awaits us, the comfort of knowing that in return for suspending our disbelief and all that is expected of us is just that we are to be present, aware, and responsive. One of my last theatre experiences before the lockdown was a little different. It was a cold, damp winter evening in Victoria as my cousin and I approached the Island Sexual Health Society to see You're Doing What at Your Age? It was a series of connected scenes about seniors' sexual activity. This applied theatre piece was generated from a shared community concern that there was not enough time or attention given by medical advisors, caregivers, and families to the recognition, desire, and acceptance of sexual activity in the aging. In a small, undressed space, about 20 people of various ages watched intently as a company of 11, seniors and 20 to 24-year-olds, raised a number of pertinent questions through their devised performance. After 40 minutes, the work ended, and with the help of a trained sexual therapist facilitator, a highly engaged conversation began amongst the audience and with the players, who spoke both in role and as themselves. You're Doing What examples the participatory nature of applied theatre, in which the audience, sharing the concerns of the piece, has an opportunity to examine the conditions of their own lives and to imagine a new topography of the possible, as Rancière puts it. Unlike mainstream theatre, whose audiences witness actions that unfold without any active participation on their part, applied theatre audiences may have already contributed their own stories and or participated in the embodied activities of the workshop from which the presentation was developed. They may also be invited to participate as the presentation unfolds. Such participatory acts are integral when we are using theatre as a democratic means of social examination, of criticism, and or of celebration. And in the generation and sharing and framing of that participation, applied theatre facilitators know that the importance of working ethically and of creating safe spaces where people can listen deeply, speak openly, and are comfortable using their own bodies as other ways of talking and listening. For those whose circumstances have not been encouraged, for those in circumstances who have not been encouraged or allowed communication on such topics, this kind of practice can be very risky work. But there's yet another kind of theatre, in which theatre artists are dedicated to different kinds of performance. They are part of an international movement, a new avant-garde, that, like those companies in the 1960s and 70s, surprise and confound us with their creative energies. Like applied theatre, these theatre companies develop their work through devising and improvisation, often using their audiences as participants or, as Carolyn Heim titled them in her 2016 text, as performers. It's these and other similarities with applied theatre that raise my concerns. In order to contain my research, I focused on two texts for reference. Jenn Harvey and Andy Lavender's 2010 Making Contemporary Theatre International Rehearsal Processes, MCT, and Jenn Stephenson's Insecurity, Perils and Products of Theatre of the Real, published in 2019, and I call that Perils. Each examines 11 productions. MCT from an observer participant's view of the rehearsal process, and Perils from the point of view of a performance theorist. These new forms of dramaturgical encounter have many descriptors. A hybrid model of theatre making, an anti-hierarchical group creation, an event that more or less resembles a play, in which profane imperfections inhere and where the edges between things remain unclear. In addition to audiences becoming performers, this postmodern post-dramatic theatre has turned its attention to social justice issues that, in turn, has led to an interest in the authenticity of the real in performance, as opposed to the fabrications of fiction. Some examples. Actors' own stories become a part of the script, being told by the actor him or herself without the cover of role. In performance, theatre-goers are enticed out of their seats to perform as part of the production. Volunteers expand the company membership without benefit of payment. Individual audience members receive the experience of a performance in which they themselves play the leading role. Perhaps Jenn Stephenson sums up the problem best when she writes of her experience in Foreign Radical, a kind of political game show for a 20-member audience. She writes, "Caught in that liminal ontology between the fictional and the actual, my real body performs real actions in a fictional context that confuse my mind, attempting to discern the stakes of these actions. This is fun that is not fun." The problem with the real is that it ignores the power of fiction to invite its audience into a space that includes their imaginations as an active part of the process. In applied theatre, the experiences of the community are fictionalized. Its components change to protect the individual. The stories then become part of a narrative that belongs to the group, not to any one person. Understanding how Coleridge's suspension of disbelief works in terms of its learning opportunities is essential in applied theatre, as it moves people from witnessing what has happened, which is closed, to imagining what could happen, which opens. It is a breach of contract that still awaits deep interrogation by this new avant-garde. Postmodern post-dramatic work cannot be identified with mainstream production, although it is, for the most part, professional and theatrical. But with its multimodal virtuosity, use of media, music, dance, and audiences as participant performers, the results are experimental, challenging, and decidedly beyond the bounds of the traditional. Looking at those earlier descriptors, such as anti-hierarchical or hybrid, they could as easily be applicable to any applied theatre project by someone who's not aware of how applied theatre works or for whom it's designed. And with so many parallel ways of working, researchers, theorists, reviewers, and other writers have a tendency to conflate the two kinds of theatre. Applied theatre attempts to moderate and mediate the risks of engagement in theatrical processes, for people have little or no theatrical experience. In postmodern, post-dramatic theatres, it seems that they seem to have little or no concern, I couldn't find it mentioned anywhere, for those whom they have appointed as participants and for whom there may be many risks, overt or hidden. This inability to see the difference between the accepted discipline of applied theatre and the multiple forms of postmodern post-dramatic work reflects an intellectual limitation that may constrain, misrepresent, or distort scholarly inquiry. Reading about these postmodern, post-traumatic experiences, many of which are highly inventive, others manipulative, and a few that leave you wondering why, I remember the excitement, the curiosity, incoherency, and yes, Jenn Stephenson, the insecurity that we all experienced with avant-garde theatre in the latter part of the 20th century. These new PMPD productions are no less intriguing, and their audiences no less enthusiastic in risking their support. And oh, the resiliency. One viewer's comment about Luke Percival's reworking of Planetoff set me to thinking. He wrote, "Boredom and depression are paradoxically employed as means of active participation, and the audience, with nothing to do, ends up listlessly impassive." A rather unusual description of participation, you might say. But when you generate a review like that about your creative work, and you can get up and go to work the next night, who can doubt the passion and the focus of creative artists to experience the risks of their engagement, nor the love of theatre that keeps audiences returning? Whether it is the aesthetic pleasures of the mainstream that reproduce a world we imagine we know, or the rewards of theatre helping to free a community's voice to create a world that includes them, or the creative impulse to work at the cutting edge to make new worlds out of the old one, the act of engaging as actor or audience here and in the moment will always invite risk. Life, as we know it, is risky, and life is the business of theatre. I can't wait for theatres to open again so that I can experience a bit of that risk. But for now, we're stuck in the pandemic, where all, it seems, everywhere and at all turns, we are being urged to be careful about how we engage in order that we may avoid risk. Be calm, be well, be sensible, and be safe. Thank you.